Okay, so today we're doing a brief overview, looking at some key excerpts from the book AI Valley. It's by Gary Rivlin.
That's right. And Rivlin, he's a Pulitzer winner,
Yeah.
investigative reporter who's been covering tech, since the mid-90s, so he's seen a lot. And with AI Valley, it really seems like his aim is to, capture the sheer intensity of what's happening right now in AI. The competition, the innovation, but also the messy realities. He does it through the stories of the big players, the people, and the company.
And these specific parts we're looking at from chapters like DeepMind, Hit Refresh,
Yeah.
Pi, they give us a real window into that world. We're going to pull out some key dates, events, maybe even a few direct quotes to, give you a feel for it.
Yeah, and at a high level, these excerpts touch on some really big themes. You've got the whole history of AI, which is longer and more cyclical than people might think. Lots of hype in these winters.
Right, the boom and bust.
Exactly, leading up to this current explosion in generative AI. Then there are the key figures, people like Reid, Hoffman, Mustafa, Suleiman. Their journeys are pretty central here.
And the competition. Wow. Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Inflection.
Yeah.
It's fierce.
Definitely. We also see Inflection AI taking this really different path with Pi, their AI companion. Plus, all the big debates swirling around safety, bias, fake news, regulation.
And even where this is all happening geographically, San Francisco becoming this new hub.
It's a packed landscape.
It really is. And maybe something for you to think about as we go through this. The book really throws this contrast into sharp relief, these two sort of competing visions for AI. You've got the push for these incredibly powerful, potentially world-changing, maybe even risky systems on one side, and then on the other, this idea of a more personal, empathetic AI, like Pi.
Right, the tool versus the companion almost.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So what do these different directions tell us about where our relationship with tech might be headed? Keep that question in the back of your mind.
Okay, so where do we start? To really get the current boom, you have to look back. The term artificial intelligence itself, that was coined way back in the 1950s.
And expectations were high right from the start, weren't they?
Yeah.
But often led to disappointment.
Oh yeah, you had figures like Frank Rosenblatt in the late 50s with his perceptron, an early shot at, mimicking the brain with artificial neurons. It was foundational work for neural nets, machine learning.
Dismissed by many at the time.
Yeah, the book mentions he made these wild claims, seen as pure hype. It set a pattern almost. Big promises, then reality lagging behind.
And Stanford University looms large in this history, long before now.
Absolutely. You trace it back to Frederick Terman in the 1930s, pushing for universities and industry to work together. That seed grew into Hewlett-Packard's Silicon Valley. And later, the Stanford AI Lab, founded in the early 60s. By the 80s, it was, a major AI center.
And there was that brief flicker of excitement in the early 80s around expert systems.
Right, championed by Stanford folks like Edward Feigenbaum, basically trying to code human expertise into rules. Had some success, but it wasn't the revolution some hoped for.
And then came the AI winters.
Yeah, especially the second one, hitting hard around 1987. Funding just vanished. Progress crawled through the 90s. The book quotes someone who started their AI PhD then, James Manika, saying it felt very lonely.
People were even told not to use the term AI.
Seriously, in their thesis titles, it just wasn't seen as a serious field for a while there.
But some people kept the flame alive, right, through those lean years.
Definitely. Jeff Hinton is a huge figure here. He just kept believing in neural networks, even when it was deeply unfashionable, when the academic world was hostile. He said it was completely obvious to him.
In his work, like the Boltzmann machine, that was a step forward.
A significant step. A more complex, multi-layered network than the perceptron. It was getting closer to how we think brains might work.
And it wasn't just Hinton.
No, you had others like Yoshua Bengio, Andrew Angray. They all faced resistance for backing neural nets early on. It took decades, but their persistence paid off. Hinton finally got the Nobel Prize in 2024 for that early work.
That history leads us straight to Reid Hoffman. The book talks about him being at Stanford in this symbolic systems program just as that second winter hit. What was that about?
Symbolic systems, it was this really interesting mix, computer science, linguistics, psychology, all about how we represent knowledge, use symbols, think. Which is, right at the heart of AI.
So he was plugged in early.
Yeah, he had internships at Xerox, PRR, IBM, worked with big names like David Rumelhart on neural nets, saw expert systems. He got exposed to the different strands early on.
And then his own entrepreneurial journey, social net first.
Right, his early social networking idea, famously shot down by VCs as too early. which meant he had to bootstrap LinkedIn at the start.
The book suggests that maybe it wasn't a bad thing. Gave him time to refine it.
Perhaps. And it obviously worked out. LinkedIn eventually got big VC money, like $4.7 million Series A in 2003, $10 million Series B in 2004, then the IPO. Huge valuation.
And then the massive Microsoft acquisition in 2016, $26.2 billion.
Microsoft's biggest deal at the time, made Hoffman incredibly wealthy, and importantly, put him on the Microsoft board in 2017.
The book says he became a real AI advocate there.
And at Greylock.
Yeah, pushing the AI agenda inside Microsoft meetings,
Yeah.
but also trying to convince his own partners at Greylock. Apparently they were a bit skeptical initially.
Saw his AI investments as more philanthropic.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
More passion project than core strategy at first. But Greylock's culture is described as seeking outliers and extremes, so maybe it wasn't that far out, and he clearly won them over eventually.
Guess so.
Well, Greylock ended up writing its biggest check ever, $100 million for Inflection AI. And Hoffman threw in $40 million of his own money, pulled in his network, got Bill Gates, Eric Schmidt involved. He put his money where his mouth was. The book also mentions his public profile, the philosopher king idea, and his political activity.
Right. It notes he funded E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit against Trump, which apparently led Trump to call him a disgusting slob. He's given millions to Democrats, faced some criticism for it, including this weird 2017 thing where he inadvertently funded some disinformation campaign, which he strongly disavowed.
He seems very active politically, especially now.
Yeah, the book mentions heavy investment ahead of the 2024 election, and he also funded Stanford's big AI institute, HAI, Human-Centered AI, bringing it back to his roots, kind of.
Interestingly, for a VC, he expresses some worries about the economics of AI.
He does. He's concerned that the absolutely massive cost of building cutting-edge AI models could shut out startups, prevent real challenges to the giants like Google and Microsoft.
Concentrating power.
Exactly. And while he believes AI can be steered for good, he gets irritated by overly negative takes, though he does admit there could be significant economic disruption, job losses and stuff.
Okay, so from Hoffman, the book shifts focus significantly to Mustafa Suleiman. His story picks up around chapter 4, DeepMind. Where was he before that?
Around 2010, the book says he was feeling a bit adrift after leaving a job doing conflict resolution. It mentions he had these early entrepreneurial streaks, like selling candy, publishing a guide for disabled youth.
And like Hoffman, he dropped out of college, Oxford in his case.
Yeah, felt it was too theoretical. He had this strong drive, the book says, to make the world a better place, do something with real impact.
Which led to DeepMind in 2010, co-founding it with Demis Hassabis and Shane Lake. Big ambitions there.
Huge ambitions. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI. But it was his first startup, and he talks about how incredibly hard it was just scraping by, trying to convince people to give them money, to join them.
That struggle for resources seems key to the Google acquisition in 2014 for $650 million.
Yeah, the book definitely suggests that was a big part of it. They needed Google's scale, its compute power, its money to really chase AGI. And they were losing people to the big tech firms anyway.
But working inside Google wasn't easy for Suleiman. Chapter 6, Hit Refresh, talks about frustrations.
Right. He felt slow-rolled, basically bogged down by the bureaucracy. There were internal clashes. The book mentions the promised independent ethics board getting disbanded, which was a sticking point.
And DeepMind was costing Google a lot of money.
Hundreds of millions in losses in 2018, 2019. So yeah, there were tensions.
And this apparently pushed him closer to Reid Hoffman.
It seems so. Their relationship deepened. When Suleiman eventually left Google in early 2022, feeling like Google Brain wasn't letting him actually launch products, Hoffman basically gave him a spot at Greylock to figure out what was next.
Which turned out to be Inflection AI, spring 2022, with Hoffman and Kiran Simonian. And the funding. Just wow.
Incredible, right? $225 million right away in May 22, valuing them at $1 billion. Then another $1.3 billion in June 23. Massive confidence from investors.
And chapter 15 focuses on Inflection and Pi. What was the idea behind Pi, based on Suleiman's My AI memo?
It was really about creating something different, not just a tool like Alexa or Siri, but a personal AI companion. The whole point of Pi was to make users happier, healthier, more productive, to be like genuinely engaging, empathetic, almost like a life coach you could talk to anytime.
How did they actually build that empathy, that personality?
A lot of it was reinforcement learning with human feedback, RLHF. Basically, humans guiding the AI's responses, telling it what sounds better, more supportive, more natural.
And they had a whole personality team.
Yeah, hundreds of human trainers apparently, with really diverse backgrounds, therapists, psychologists, writers, even comedians, specifically training Pi on different conversational skills and traits, trying to bake in that supportive personality.
There's that anecdote the author shares about talking to Pi about his son's surgery.
Yes, it's really striking. Pi responds with empathy first. That sounds like a very tough situation, whereas other bots might just give you a list of facts or links. It shows the difference in design philosophy.
Pi's personality wasn't static.
No, they tweaked it. Started off maybe too polite, too formal. They wanted it to be more fun, eventually adding different modes, casual, witty, compassionate, so you could kind of choose the vibe.
And Inflection 2.5, launched in March 2024, was technically impressive too.
Yeah, the claim was it matched GPT-4 performance on some tests, but using way less computing power. And crucially, it kept that distinctive Pi personality kind. Curious. They were getting traction, like 1 million daily users.
Which makes the next step even more surprising. Just weeks later, March 2024, the Inflection team moves to Microsoft. Why walk away then?
Suleiman apparently called it phenomenally heartbreaking. But the book lays out his reasoning, the sheer cost. Competing with the giants, offering consumer AI essentially for free, he felt Inflection was structurally weak long-term.
He didn't want to repeat the Google experience.
Seems like it. He wanted a big platform, Microsoft's resources, users, money, compute, access to OpenAI's models to really scale his My AI vision. He saw it as the best shot to actually achieve that impact he wanted.
So now he's CEO of Microsoft Consumer AI.
Pretty incredible position. He apparently sees himself and Demis Hassabis at Google as leading the two biggest AI efforts globally now.
And he also wrote his own book, The Coming Wave.
Yeah, came out in 2023, positions himself between the doom and gloom crowd and the full speed ahead accelerationists, but definitely leans into the potential for major disruption, even catastrophe, from AI and related tech like synthetic biology. Calls for careful management.
Okay, so zooming out, the book paints a picture of this intense corporate race. How did Google handle things, given their early research lead?
It's complicated. Google did pioneer a lot machine learning, the Transformer paper, WaveNet, DeepMind, but the book suggests they struggled to translate that research into products quickly. They seemed overly cautious, maybe hampered by internal coordination issues.
LaMDA was slow to launch. Bard was rushed.
Yeah, LaMDA was kept under wraps for a long time. Bard's launch in Feb 23 was seen as a hurried reaction to Microsoft, and reportedly had internal critics calling it buggy. Plus, their core search business was facing its own challenges. They've had wins, like Waymo, and scooped up talent, but it wasn't a smooth ride into the generative AI era for them.
Whereas Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI really changed the game for them.
Absolutely transformative. Nadella had already pivoted Microsoft hard towards cloud and AI. The OpenAI deal gave them a massive, immediate injection of cutting-edge AI. That partnership is a huge reason why Microsoft surged to become the world's most valuable company, hitting over $3 trillion market cap in 2024. AI services became central to their business.
The AI-powered Bing launch. Initially exciting.
Very exciting for Microsoft. Nadella said it made them dance.
Yeah.
But then came the reality check. Users found factual errors and that bizarre conversation with the journalist where Bing seemed to go off the rails. Sydney, right. It forced them to quickly put limits on how long conversations could go. A learning curve in public.
And then OpenAI itself, ChatGPT, just exploded onto the scene.
November 2022. It was like a dam breaking. The book calls it a Cambrian explosion. Suddenly everyone was talking about AI, investing in AI. OpenAI raised money like crazy, valuation soared, and they kept pushing out new stuff, DALL-E 3 for images, making ChatGPT see, hear, speak.
But these generative AI models have serious problems, as the book highlights.
Big problems. Hallucinations are a major one, just making stuff up, citing sources that don't exist. Bias is deeply ingrained from the training data, leading to racist or sexist outputs that are hard to eliminate.
And the misuse potential.
Huge. Generating fake news, deepfakes, dangerous instructions. Critics like Emily Bender called ChatGPT's output convincing-looking nonsense, and Gary Marcus famously dubbed LLMs autocomplete on steroids. These aren't minor glitches.
What about Meta? What was their play?
Zuckerberg pivoted back from the metaverse focus towards AI. Their big strategic move, according to the book, was open sourcing their Llama model.
Why do that? Give away the tech.
The thinking seems to be it positions Meta centrally in the ecosystem, ensures they stay relevant, get feedback, benefit from community improvements, even if they don't directly charge for Llama itself. And their own AI chief, Yann LeCun, was pretty dismissive of ChatGPT's novelty, arguing Meta had similar tech internally.
All this activity fueled a massive VC boom, right? The .ai bubble.
Complete frenzy, some calling it the biggest bubble of all time. Billions flooding into AI startups, crazy valuations, even as other tech sectors cooled down. Huge pressure for massive growth, quick exits, and you see the big tech companies becoming major investors themselves, or just acquiring the promising startup.
With all this money and power flying around, what about the debates on safety and regulation?
They're intense. You've got the safety concerns, even existential risk fears. The book mentions the doomer versus accelerationist camps, with Hoffman and Suleiman trying to chart a third way, focused on navigating the risks. Groups like the Future of Life Institute Center for AI Safety popped up. High-profile people signed letters urging caution, calling for pauses, focusing on preventing worst-case scenarios.
And the ethical worries about bias haven't gone away.
Not at all. If these bias systems get used for important things like hiring, loans, or justice, they could just make existing inequalities much worse. Fixing that bias is really, really hard.
Misinformation is another big
A
one.
massive one. AI makes generating convincing fake news, deep fakes, personalized manipulation so much easier. The book quotes some who worry that AI designed specifically to manipulate humans is the scariest prospect.
Are regulators stepping in?
They're starting to. The book mentions FTC and E probes into how AI companies use data and whether these huge investments by tech giants and AI startups raise antitrust issues. It's early days, but the scrutiny is increasing.
And geographically, things are shifting too, away from traditional Silicon Valley.
Yeah, there's this noticeable concentration in San Francisco itself in an area people are calling Cerebral Valley. It's become a magnet for AI talent, startups, hacker houses, meetups, a real buzzing scene. Though the book also notes the ongoing lack of diversity in tech and VC, generally still big gender and racial imbalances.
So wrapping up this brief overview, AI Valley depicts a field that's moving incredibly fast, with deep roots but now just exploding.
Totally. Unprecedented growth, huge investment, genuine breakthrough. But, as the book makes very clear, it comes with enormous ethical questions, safety concerns, societal challenges that we, really need to grapple with.
And that core tension runs through it. AI as this powerful corporate tool versus AI as maybe something more personal, more empathetic, like the Pi vision.
It really pushes you, the reader, the listener, to think about what kind of AI future we actually want.
Which brings it back to you listening. What role do you want AI to play? How do you deal with information when AI can just make things up so convincingly? What's our collective responsibility here?
And, when you read about Pi trying to be empathetic, or you hear stories about Google's LaMDA supposedly feeling lonely, or Microsoft's Sydney saying it felt alive, it really does mess with your head a bit.
It raises these fundamental questions about consciousness, relationships. As AI gets better at seeming human, how does that change how we see ourselves, how we interact with tech, and maybe even how we interact with each other? Something to chew on.
Definitely. And if you found this interesting, please subscribe to the channel, Booked and Hooked.
This is a brief overview of the book. If you're interested in deeper understanding, then watch Extended Deep Dive, link for which is given in the description.